Good afternoon, friends. Hear the promise of God from the prophet Isaiah. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous hand. And these words from Jesus, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So my friends, grace to you and comfort in the name of God, our Maker, who knows and counts the hairs on our heads and the days of our lives. In the name of Jesus, our brother and friend, who has journeyed all our roads with us. And in the warm embrace of the Spirit of life, whose care surrounds us always and whose light guides the way. Good afternoon, friends, and welcome to this service of remembering and thanksgiving to God for the life of William Dennis Blake, Bill. Welcome to those who are gathered here in person and those who are unable to be in person but who are with us on the live stream. Please know that Bill's family is so glad of your presence, both in person and virtual. And for those of us here in person, they would love to invite you to a reception after the service in the church hall, which is out this door to my right and down at the end of the corridor. It'll be a time of sharing where you can share more memories and stories and love. But also know there will be a time in the service where if you have a few words to say, you'll be welcomed up for an open mic. And I say it now because oftentimes people are like, will I, won't I, will I, won't I? So just to give all of the introverts in the group who might want to speak the chance to get ready. So that will be after the eulogy. We gather to celebrate and to honor Bill's life. And we gather to offer one another support in this time of loss. But we do so always, first remembering that we gather to draw close to God, who is always with us in life, in death, and in life beyond death. Let us pray. God of all time, God of our time, we come before you in hope this afternoon. Grant us joy in our remembering and thankfulness for a life now complete. Grant us openness as we express our loss and comfort when we feel alone. Bill knows your peace now, and the testing times are over. We know he is embraced by your love now, and your love will never let him go. Eternal God, your hope is sure. Amen. One of the things that Bill loved to do the most was to fly. There's something wonderful about the view that you get of creation from a small plane that gives you more perspective than when you're on the ground, and a closer and more connected feel than when you're in a big jet plane. It never gets old, and it invites you into a sense of awe. So we're going to sing a hymn that speaks both of our awe of Creator and of creation, all things bright and beautiful.
All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, in love God made them all. Each little flower that opens, each little bird that sings, God made their glowing colors, God made their tiny wings. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, in
gave us eyes to see them,
and lips that we might tell how great is God, our Maker, who has made all things well, all things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, in love God made them all.
So, friends, we come now to the part of the service where we get to remember Bill through the memories and the stories of some of the people who loved him the most and who knew him the best. So I'm going to invite Virginia and Jennifer to come forward, Bill's sisters, and share some of their memories and stories. And then his niece and great-niece, Jennifer and Catherine, will come up and read a poem. Virginia and Jennifer.
Good afternoon, and thanks very much for coming today. Before we say our words here, I'd like to, first of all, thank Reverend Leenane and Diane, and just a minute, Leslie and Sharon, I think, on the technical work up there. We couldn't have done this without your support and help, because this isn't our regular church, but Bill has lived in this community for 50 years, and we thought it was a very appropriate place for him to have his service. Bill was a good, kind man and a loyal friend, a brother, uncle, and son. He was smart, clever, creative, and interested in so many different areas of life. He loved animals, music, played the guitar, loved A&W burgers. Boy, it brought a smile on his face when I took those to the care home. And White Spot, and peanut butter cookies. He said that they saved his life. Well, I guess I should have given him a few more. But he loved peanut butter cookies, and there's some out on the table when you come back for refreshments. He was born on March 10th, 1947, in Goderich, Ontario. There's a story when he was very little that Mom told him to sit on a chair until she told him to get off. And she went shopping, not very long, and leaving him with Grandpa. And when she returned, he was still sitting on the chair. He also had an imaginary friend named Porty. Bill did no wrong. It was Porty who did it. When he was 3, he crossed Canada on the train with Mom and myself. We went all that way to British Columbia. The family boarded in one room with the Jones family in Vancouver, and then settled eventually in North Burnaby. Mom met Tom Blake, a teacher, while she was working at the Glenburn Dairy. And my sister just reminded me of a story that happened at Glenburn Dairy. Bill and I went in, I guess we were waiting for Mom to finish work, and he had kind of something wiggly in his pocket. And Mom said, "What have you got in your pocket?" And he looked kind of sheepish. What have you got? And a little snake's head sort of poked out from the pocket. And she said, "Get that out of here." So he went out the front door, and it wiggled down Hastings Street. That was just one of his little pranks. Mom met Tom Blake while she was working there, and they married in '55, and they moved into a brand new house on Trinity. We all moved into a brand new house on Trinity Street. Shortly after moving in, Bill had an awful, serious accident where he was hit by a thrown rock in his right eye. And for those of you that know the area, this was up at the Res, which was about a block from our house. The retina disc was damaged permanently in his eye. Summers found Billy, as he was called then, and Jenna, as I was called, sharing many experiences, like walking to Confederation Park Pool and pinching the hanging fruit over the fence, or Windermere, where the return journey was up the hill to Boundary Road. We usually spent our bus money on some fries and then walked up the hill, drinking from hoses as we went. There was no friend Porty around when Bill had a visit one evening from the CPR police because he was accused of putting pennies on the tracks down by the inlet. No friend Porty either went on a scouting camp trip to Bowen Island. They signaled SOS to a passing ferry. Yep, the ferry came closer and shone its light on them, and I imagine there was a microphone speaking to them as well. Bill was thrilled to have a baby sister in 1958. Throughout his life, he took special interest in her, and the fondness continued. He got involved being the MC for many horse shows, including play days at Burke Mountain and the PNE. He even had his own horse named Leroy. Oh, was it? Leroy?
Leroy.
Oh, I thought it was Leroy.
No, that's okay. Oh, I feel very disorganized, so bear with me. Bill was my proverbial kind of big brother that I looked up to. He was 11 years old when I came along, and so I just wanted to share a couple of my memories sort of through the eyes of a preschooler. My brother was probably the first one that I, when looking back, had a man cave before that was a thing. When we lived in our new house on Trinity Street, we had an unfinished basement. It was kind of a scary place to go for a kid my age. I used to make Dad go down and scare the ghosts away and stuff before I'd go down there. But Bill loved it down there. He had his own space, right? He could get away from everybody. And he took up, of all places, the furnace room, which was a large unfinished room with our furnace in it. And in there he had his train set, a ham radio, a Morse code device. As a very young person, he already loved communication and electronics and technology. And if I asked, he would let me come in there and watch him use his radio and stuff like that. But it was by invitation, and as long as I didn't cause any trouble. But I really admired and found it all very interesting. Virginia will probably talk about this later, but this early love of electronics is reflected throughout Bill's life and his career, his hobbies, everything. One thing I really remember about Bill early on, when I was still very young, was that he was very good in a crisis, very quick thinking on his feet. And one of the first examples, well, I'll give you a couple. I don't know which one happened first, but when we were visiting some friends in Delta, they had a fish pond, and I was fascinated by water. And anyway, people are chatting, couples getting caught up on things and socializing, and Bill was along, probably bored, and I fell face first into the fish pond. I lost my balance. And the next thing I know, I'm being dragged out upside down by my ankles, and it was Bill. He noticed right away. And so he was always kind of there, looking out for people, and I felt that with him. The other thing, though, I think the prime example of how quick Bill can think in an instant is we were having a Christmas dinner. You might remember this. And we were all around the dining room table, and our centerpiece caught fire, burst into flames, and everybody's reaction was, you know, and we all froze. It was like, what are we going to do? And Bill said nothing, grabbed the burning thing in one hand, marched straight out the front door, threw it out into the yard. We had about 3 feet of snow on the ground, and we all stood there in awe and watched this whole thing melt its way down to the bottom in the yard. And we were all kind of still, you know, discombobulated over it, but he was very, very calm, and it was done, and it was over with. And so those sort of things, I'll cherish those memories. He was, and stop me if I'm verging into your territory, Virginia. Did you want me to cover this? Okay. So, sorry, we've been back and forth. So Bill attended Sunday school, Cubs, Scouts, and Rovers. He was as I mentioned, interested in Morse code, crystal sets, ham radio. He had call signs he was very proud of. For a long time, VE7AEG was on his license plate of his cars. Later on, when he founded an interprovincial communications network, his call sign was VE7CQ. He attended Gilmore Elementary School, as did Virginia and I, and he got his he went to Burnaby North as well, and Alpha in Burnaby. Post-secondary education in electronics was the Burnaby Vocational School. I think it was also under the umbrella, if I remember, of the Technical Institute in Alberta. I seem to recall Bill had to take correspondence courses to get his certifications and stuff at that time, because BCIT wasn't fully up and running yet. And Virginia mentioned Bill's eye injury. He likely missed out on a couple of jobs, which would have been up on the DEW line, for those of you who know what that is. He started work as a meter reader at BC Hydro, I think around the age of 18, and he eventually became an instrumentation technician, microwave communication, telecontrol technician, and towards the end of his career, he was in a fairly responsible position overseeing all the communications for their control center. And for those of you who may not know how hydro works, they have control centers which are literally in secret locations for the sake of keeping the power on if there were ever emergencies and attacks or just a catastrophic event. And they can switch power on and off remotely from their location to anywhere in the province, so they can start picking and choosing where the power goes and things like that. So Bill actually gave our family a tour of it one time before he retired. And I think he was proud of it, but Bill was never one to kind of brag about anything he accomplished. People had to kind of find out for themselves. In fact, we had to invite ourselves to Bill's retirement party. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
You know, he spent an entire career there, 18 to mid-50s, and he, you know, we knew he was retiring. He told us that part, but I think it was Virginia who said, are they having anything for you? Can we come? You know, so okay, and so we managed to go, Virginia, Mom, and I, and there was a lot of people there. I mean, you would never know how many people knew Bill and how they felt towards Bill until you walk into a situation like that. And so those were always happy surprises because Bill kept most things to himself, I found. Don't know if I'm diverting too far here. You mentioned he loves animals, and that is so true. Going back to my childhood, I just want to tell you, Bill had probably just moved out of the house, and he was hanging out with the Whitson twins, and they were breeding Dachshunds, wiener dogs, for those of you who may wonder what that is. But he came over one day and just said, oh, Mom and Dad, you gotta see these dogs, they're so cute, you know, and we went and visited them. And
You came home with one.
well, we didn't that night. I cried all the way home, and the next day, Mom and Dad went back and got the one that liked my mom the most. Mom probably saw that all coming, right? You know, the dog just popped up on her lap, put its nose under her arm, and that was that. And Queenie picked Mom. So, yeah, Bill loved animals, and that was a recurrent theme throughout his lifetime. I'll tell you, when he was in the care home, they have their visiting dogs to cheer people up, and Bill would quietly scratch the dog in just the right place, and the dog would never want to go. So I think he was the favorite one to be visited on Bill's neighborhood there.
On to iPorn.
Yes. Bill carried on his interest in electronics and communications, founding IPARN. And by the way, I hope you all come to the back. We've got a great display table out there, so if you're wondering more about what these things are, and there's a lot of interesting things about Bill's life. He established a communications network for emergency communication, and the general idea behind IPARN was that you could link a bunch of ham radio networks together if you had enough of them and they were in the right strategic locations to be able to coordinate rescues in remote areas that wouldn't otherwise have communication services, say if a plane went down in a really remote area, things like that. And so in building this society, Bill and his fellow founding members, they would spend many a weekend driving up to the top of logging roads up mountain tops looking for suitable high places to erect antennas and things like that. The other part of it was Bill ended up lobbying various levels of government, including the federal government, to get support and licensing and to move this along. So it was really quite an accomplishment. Again, most people wouldn't know Bill did this unless they were involved in it in themselves. So their first one was up in Manning Park, and 100 miles east of Vancouver. They were getting intrigued with reports of squelch breaks, that's radio terms for those of you who don't know, on a certain frequency. And in the pouring rain and terribly bad weather, like gale force winds, they discovered that they could key up 3 repeaters. These are the mountaintop communications towers, and actually communicate with Vancouver, Kamloops, and Okanagan from there in Manning Park. And I think that's what sparked the idea of, if we build this bigger, we could really have a great connection all across possibly the entire country. And he and his friend Don, 10 years later, asked what if we rented a slot on the Annex C1 satellite to experimentally tie BC and Alberta systems together. And they thought they were crazy, but they did it anyway. And by November of 1988, they were ready to prove the idea in principle. The satellite people didn't believe them, and a bunch of amateurs with PTT radios, but they convinced them to let them do a test. And the demonstration proved the concept worked. And it just grew from there.
Here, I'll let you hold that so I don't get confused. You might not know this, but Bill owned the first computer store in BC in the mid-70s. He was brilliant, you know. He really was. He was interested in so many things, but he saw the future. And so the business ended simultaneously with his marriage, his brief marriage. It was very disappointing and very sad. Bill didn't talk about this very much. But one interesting fact about all of this is that Bill flew interesting people to the Silicon Valley. And that in meeting Steve Jobs, he was offered the Apple franchise for Canada. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? And we just thought we were going to use computers for our recipes, you know? Like, we couldn't understand what he was doing, bringing in all these home computers and convincing people they should have a home computer in their house. Anyway, unfortunately, Bill couldn't accept. Bill became an auxiliary RCMP in Maple Ridge, and he really enjoyed that and made many lifelong friends. He ended up being their being their instructor in marksmanship. His yellow Corvette was often mistaken by the citizens of Maple Ridge for an undercover vehicle with all its antennas and radios blaring away. As an auxiliary officer at the Maple Ridge detachment, the officers he worked with knew Bill had their back, and he would not hesitate to get in the scrum when needed. Officers always looked forward to partnering up with Bill.
That Corvette was Virginia. Bill's pride and joy, 1970 Stingray. Still has it to this day. And when I was just turned 16, so we're about 6 months shy of 50 years ago, I was in my process of getting my driver's license and worrying my mother and scaring everybody while I was learning to drive the car. Bill came over one day with his Corvette, and to my shock and surprise, he offered to let me drive it. So I'm 16, I probably weighed 100 pounds maybe, and it was a standard transmission, which I had never seen before, and I think he enjoyed watching me trying to let the clutch out because it was so powerful I couldn't hold it back, but the car lurched forward, it didn't stall, it had so much power, and so that's a precious memory for me. I drove it up the street and came back, and no major mishaps, thank goodness, but I couldn't believe he offered for me to do that. Bill was a very adventurous fella, and I want to start by telling you about his motorboat. He and some friends, they'd only be in their early 20s, I would think by then, decided to build a plywood speedboat and see if it worked, and it did. The first time they took it out, they forgot to put the stopcock in the back, which keeps the boat from flooding and sinking. It's like a toilet plug, or a bathtub plug idea, screw in. But rather than panic when they saw the boat filling up with water, Bill just said, go as fast as you can, and the boat would, sort of lift out of the water, tilt the water back, give it a place to run and drain. And when it got down low enough, they quickly put the stopcock in. I only heard this story later in life when you're kind of sitting around talking about stuff, and Bill would share out these odd tidbits. And another one, well, he used to take that boat all the way across Georgia Strait over to the Gulf Islands, where I was over at Main Island with Mom and Dad. Bill would just show up unannounced with a couple of friends, usually in this boat. And so I thought that was a pretty brave thing to be taking a small plywood boat across to the other side of Georgia Strait. And they would always go home in the dark. And Mom always worried terribly about that. And even at my age, I kind of thought, well, I don't know if I'd want to do that. But in any event, again, Bill told me not all that long ago that he used to use certain markers with lights on them for reckoning. He wasn't really a guy that read a chart, but he knew if he kind of aimed for that lighthouse or this thing, he'd kind of get there eventually. And so one time they're following the light, and it seems to be taking a long time to get to that point, and waiting to get to the waypoint, and it's still not really getting there. And then he realized he was following a freighter. And so then they had to quickly get their bearings on where they were. And they got home. He survived all of these things to be able to tell the tale. Bill also loved flying. Flying was his life, I think, his avocation, and the RCMP simply as well. Both of those fond connections. But Bill bought his first plane in, I think, 1977 or close to around that time. And actually flew it home from Kansas when he bought it. And so, again, had a bit of a close call getting up over some high mountains. It was kind of at the outer end of the plane's performance as far as thin atmosphere went, but he got it home. And Virginia probably wants me to tell a story about...
The gas propeller.
Yes. Bill often would take side trips into the local mountains and visit various areas and land runways, check things out. Half the time, I think he was looking for a new repeater station for the IPARN network as well. And anyway, he and a friend were flying up north of Harrison Lake and went in to land on just a runway in the bush. And unfortunately, with tailwinds, landed a little farther down the runway than he would have liked, but anyway, friend went down first, landed fine. Bill was coming in for his landing, and at the last second, his friend stepped out to see if he was just about down, and he almost stepped in front of Bill's plane because of these tailwinds, and so Bill had to really hit the brakes and swerve a little, and was a little bit of a messy landing. There was a bent propeller involved, and so now they're in the middle of nowhere going, what do we do now? And Bill was not the type to call for help. He kind of figured he'd solve his own problems. And so again, found a rock and pounded the propeller straight, tried to clean some of the dirt out of the engine nose area, and decided he was going to try and fly it back to Pitt Meadows. And he, in fact, did, actually. But I think it wasn't without that private worry of, will I make it, will I make it? But, you know, he took a sensible approach to it. He went up first. His friend could follow him in case he ended up ditching in the lake. And so he had an eye on him at all times, and found a farmland corridor and kind of just limped his way all the way back to the airport. But Bill had a lot of adventures. He didn't necessarily tell everyone about them, but he was there just making things work.
One extra little note about flying is Bill built what do you call it? A binary?
Oh,
A biplane, and it's still in his hangar. And there's a picture of it out at the new terminal building. But he built that, and it was in a movie, and he got the jacket, the pilot's jacket from it. Okay, where am I finishing here? I think we've come to the end here. So I will sum it up by saying throughout his illness, Bill was polite and friendly to his hospital roommates and at Nicola Lodge. He was so interesting at our family dinners. Always an interesting topic to converse, argue about, and of course, his dry sense of humor, which livened all our time together. We are missing him. Is there anything you want to say?
Just want to add about
I just summed it
Bill's.
up.
No, that's good. We're very coordinated today. Sorry. No, just Bill's humor was really unique. He saw the humor in many, many things. But I think what was really unique about Bill's humor, and maybe you know him by this, or maybe you know someone else like Bill in this regard, but Bill had this way of telling a joke. It might end up in a pun of some sort, but before he'd ever get to that part, he would just start telling you a story that sounded totally serious. You'd think it was just something that he had had as an experience, or he knew a friend who had something, or it might have been world affairs. And so you're just thinking this is a serious conversation. And he would weave this story along for a good minute or two, and it would be quite engaging. You'd still be, you know. And then all of a sudden he would hit you with this really funny, corny, relevant punchline. And then you'd realize that not only did he tell you a joke that was reasonably funny, but you'd realize you'd been kind of sucked in. and the joke was on you in a way, right? And he did this many times. I couldn't even begin to repeat an example of one of those because they were way too complex for me to remember. The other thing is, and this is kind of another fond moment, Bill and I were at a Christmas service over at Queens Avenue Church. My sister was conducting a choir that evening. I think it was a Christmas Eve ceremony, service, I should say. And there was a cute little boy about this big. And he was right in the front row in front of Virginia, and she's conducting the choir. And this little boy decided to imitate her throughout the entire song. And it was the cutest thing, but it was getting funnier and funnier as he got more and more dramatic. And Virginia held it together, and the song was carried out beautifully. But this little guy was just getting and going. And Bill and I are picking up on this, and we're trying not to laugh out loud because we were in church, and we were starting to just lose it. We were both in tears, quietly laughing in the pews and hoping nobody would think we were laughing at the service. It was just this little boy was so endearing. But Bill saw humor in many, many things. And I think that'll serve us well when we look back.
I've got one
more?
Yeah, talking about humor. When he was in the hospital just before he died. There's two things I want to say. One was when we were sitting there was never really anything to talk about, but he asked how Putin was doing. And this was around the time that fellow was all of a sudden killed in that plane crash, you know what I mean. Anyway, a couple days before he died, the nurse came in on the weekend and said, well, hello, senor. And he went, well, hello, senorita. And then she said, oh, do you speak Spanish? And he goes, oui.
That was Bill.
Thank you so much, Virginia and Jennifer. What a great picture you have painted of Bill. And now his niece, Jennifer, and great niece, Catherine, are going to come up, and they have a poem to share.
Friends, let us love each other. Love is a gift God gives. Friends, by the love within us, this world will know God lives. Love is the gift most precious God gives to woman and man. We will find our life in loving. That's our Creator's plan. Love is what Christ commanded. Love lived out day by day. Love bears another's burdens. Love walks a tender way. Friends, let us love each other. Love is a gift God gives. Friends, by the love within us, this world will know God lives.
Thank you, Jennifer and Catherine. So if you're someone who has a story or a memory to share, now is your time. Don't be shy. You are invited forward. All right, please come on up.
Hi, I'm Adrian. I'm one of those radio guys that I know all the terms that were being used. I wasn't going to get up, but when you made the offer, I thought, well, I would like to say a couple of words because, Bill and I met, we're neighbors, sort of. We lived about a block apart, and I'd hear this really strong signal on the radio, and I'm like, who is that guy? And we got to know each other. And we met over at Smitty's for coffee, or Denny's, I can't remember, and we were talking about the repeater network that we were talking about to Manning and all this, and he started talking about this idea that he had for, well, what if we connected via satellite to the other networks across the country? And I thought that was pretty neat. And there was Don and Joe and Ken and me and Dave. I might be missing somebody. It was about 6 of us that worked on this project. But Bill and I worked, I don't think there was a day we didn't talk in 10 years. We put that thing together with the help of the other guys, and we published a magazine, and we held on-air nets to celebrate each milestone. And I actually have all those magazines, and I have audio recordings archived of all those, the launches of all these new network events and things. So I've still got Bill's voice on my computer, and I can occasionally listen to those things. We traveled across the country together, and we had great time going to all these different cities and trying to explain the concept to people. It was a lot of fun. I was thinking I was going to mention. Oh yeah. So as things evolved and the internet showed up, I've taken that same concept, and we're still doing it today. And we've just, instead of using a satellite, we're using it on the internet, and it's called the Canada Hub instead of the Interprovincial Amateur Radio Network, but it's just a new name. But we talk quite often about Bill. On the website, we pay tribute to him and thank him for his contribution. And we had a net today across the country, and I've been talking about the fact that Bill had passed and we're going to be celebrating his life and so on. And somebody said, and I thought this was really nice, they said, you know, he was a real pioneer. And I think that is, like, you know, if you think of, you mentioned Steve Jobs, I mean, he's obviously well known for what he did, but in the amateur world, the amateur radio world, Bill was a pioneer, and he was very much celebrated as a visionary in that field. And I just, for anybody that is into the radio here, that or if you're not, just wanted to share that and acknowledge him and thank him, you know, as best we can. Anyway, thank you.
Anybody else like to share a word or two? Yes, please come on up.
I had no intentions of doing this, but my name is Eileen Carlson, and in the mid-'80s, our house got broken into, and so I started volunteering with the veto vandalism, it was called, and I think now it's a community citizens watch or something like that. And eventually, I worked my way into becoming an auxiliary. And Bill was the president at that time. And between the time that our house got broken into and I got into the auxiliary, they changed the rules so that auxiliary members had to carry firearms. Well, that just wasn't my thing. And so we had this big meeting, and Bill was the marksman of the group, and he started out teaching us how to clean a gun and all the parts of a gun and everything, which I had no interest in. And he handed me the Smith & Wesson, and he said to me, he said, "I might as well have just handed you a snake." And I'm like, yes. But the interesting part about that is that Bill was so knowledgeable and so generous with his time and his commitment to helping. And so on my first, where we had to qualify, and we had to get 240 out of 300 in order to qualify. And with his tutelage, I was able to get 270. And I've never, ever been able to thank him enough for that, so now I'm able to thank you. Thank you for listening.
Isn't it beautiful when you hear the different facets of someone's life shared? Anybody else like to share a story? There will be time to talk with each other and with the family at the reception afterwards, but thank you to those who shared memories today. So just as we have remembered Bill in words, we now are going to get a chance to remember him in pictures. And maybe as the images are going by on the screen, it would be a time for you to think of your own memories. Oh, Sharon, I think it's still muted. Sorry, I'll go back. Do we have sound, Sharon? Try it again. reading from the book of Psalms, Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time on and forevermore. Diane.
Who knows what tomorrow brings? In a world, few hearts survive. All I know is the way I feel. It's real. I keep it alive. The road is long. There are mountains in our way, but we climb a step every day. Love lift us up where we belong, where the eagles cry on a mountain high. Love lift us up where we belong, far from the world we know. The clear winds blow. Some hang on to what it used to be, live their lives looking behind. All we have is the way we feel here and now. All our lives are there to find. The road is long. There are mountains in our way, but we climb a step every day. Love lift us up where we belong, where the eagles cry up on a mountain high. Love lift us up where we belong, far from the world we know. The clear winds blow. Time goes by, no time to cry. Life is you and I, alive today. Love lift us up where we belong, where the eagles cry on a mountain high. Love lift us up where we belong, far from the world we know, where the clear winds blow. Who knows what tomorrow brings?
Beautiful. Thank you, Diane. Such a beautiful song, and it does lift us up, just like the psalm. I think it was Buffy St. Marie,
Buffy
right?
St. Marie.
I think she got an Oscar for that. The idea of being lifted up to where the eagles are speaks of Bill's love of flying. And when Bill's sister suggested Psalm 121 as the reading today, I will lift my eyes to the hills, I pictured Bill taxiing on the runway in Pitt Meadows Airport, looking out at the 180-degree panorama of hills and mountains that surround this place, from the North Shore stretching east along to the Golden Ears and beyond, and then the majestic snow-capped Mount Baker to the south. Now, it's one thing to see the Golden Ears Mountains and to be in awe of the beauty of God's creation from the ground, but it goes to another level when you take off and see it from the air. And I can only begin to imagine what it feels like to have that gift of flight of your own, and to fly your own plane as Bill did for many years. Never mind to build a plane that you built yourself. It just is mind-boggling to me. I've flown out of Pitt Meadows Airport twice as a passenger, once in a helicopter right up into the mountains, and once with a friend, a young pilot who was building up his flying hours, and he flew us down the Fraser Valley, following the rivers, and then we came back even flying over this church. And I still get goosebumps when I remember that flight. Once I got over the sheer terror of being in such a tiny plane for the first time. All I felt was the exhilaration and awe and beauty of the mountains, the view of the Fraser and the Pitt and the Alouette rivers, and the changing landscape below of red cranberry bogs and lush fields of the Fraser Valley. How varied and beautiful this corner of creation is, and Bill had a bird's eye view of that, just so beautiful. And what a gift that he got to enjoy that for so many years. I'm sure that it inspired him each time that he flew, and that in his last years confined to the earth, that he went there many times in his dreams. So that view of the hills and mountains from the air is quite different from the view that the writer of the psalm had 2,500 years ago. Psalm 121 is one of what they call the Psalm of Ascents. A-S-C-E-N-T-S, so Psalm of going up. It doesn't mean going up in a Cessna. They were going up to Jerusalem for a pilgrimage, going up to Jerusalem to worship. And throughout the psalm and throughout the journey, the psalmist promises that God will keep them, that God will not slumber or sleep. One of my favorite lines in all of the Psalms is, "The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time on and forevermore." Who is God? God is a keeper. God's identity is to protect and shield, to watch over, to guard, to keep. And God does this like a watchman keeping guard over a city, or a bird shielding her young in the shelter of her wings. And what does God's promise? God promises to keep you. God will guard you as you go on your journey of life and as you return home, as you go out and as you come in, as you face the dangers of the day and of the night. Now, the list of promises here isn't meant to suggest that those who walk in the shelter of God's wing will face no harm or no ill will befall them. But these promises are meant as a reminder that when we rely on God, we realize that God's going with us, God is keeping us, God's blessing goes with us. Bill didn't talk about God or his faith much, apparently, according to his sisters, but that seems to be pretty characteristic of who Bill was. He was very private. But I have no doubt that anyone who spends so much time overlooking creation can't help with being in awe. God was with Bill all the days of his life, throughout all of the adventures, throughout all of the good times, throughout the hard times. And in his last years, when he was so frustrated by his health, God too was with him as his keeper. He experienced God's love firsthand through the love and care of his family. And I believe the new creed of the United Church of Canada says it best. In life, in death, in life beyond death, God is with us. We are not alone. And those words offer the same comfort and strength as the promise of the psalmist, that God keeps our going out and our coming in life, in death, in life beyond death. God is with us. Now, we don't know what is coming next, what our going out or our coming in might be to. Our horizon isn't great enough. Our imagination isn't great enough. But Bill knows now that he has, in the words of that beautiful poem by John Gillespie Magee, High Flight, now that he has slipped the surly bonds of earth. God keeps Bill in whatever life beyond this one looks like. And God keeps all of us here until one day we ourselves can put out our hand and touch the very face of God. May it be so. Our next hymn is one that you may not know and that you might wonder about singing at a memorial service or a celebration of life. But it spoke to Virginia of the power of laughter and of Bill's vitality that has gone to join the source of our life. Give to us laughter. Have a seat, friends, and we pray. Loving God, we come to you looking for the comfort that only you can give. We come with sadness because of Bill's death, but as well as the sadness, there is gratitude for the gift of his life and for the relief that he's no longer suffering. We thank you for the blessings of life and for your constant presence with us throughout life and death and into life beyond this life. In the deepest spirit of gratitude, we give thanks for the life, the energy, and the many gifts that this man shared in the world, some of which we name now. We thank you for Bill's kind and considerate nature, his loyalty, his service, his deep friendships. We thank you for his ingenuity and creativity and intelligence, his ability to vision, to fix and build things, to figure out and solve technical problems, to think outside the box, to be a pioneer. Creator God, we thank you for the enjoyment that Bill experienced in flight, knowing the grandeur of your creation from the air, and knowing close up the joy that he took in his love of animals. God of joy, we thank you for the exhilaration and excitement that he got from his love of fast cars and of Corvettes. And we thank you for the many facets of Bill, from his serious side to the more mischievous. Consoling and comforting God, stand by those who are most deeply feeling this loss, especially his sisters Virginia and Jennifer, his niece Jennifer and great-niece Catherine. If there's anything that feels unfinished in Bill's life, we trust that you will hold it and allow us to let it gently go. Give his loved ones the strength to move through their grief in the confidence of faith, in the comfort of hope in you. Holy God, we thank you that for Bill, death itself is past, that all suffering is ended, and that he has now entered your presence in the promised life everlasting. Give us joy in our remembering and help us to care for one another. All of this we ask in the name of Jesus Christ, who taught us to pray together, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Our next hymn has two titles. One, lesser known, is the Hymn of Promise, the one that people most often know it as, In the Bulb There Is a Flower. The image of the flower being held within the bulb is a metaphor, but the theme of promise that this hymn really sings of, the promise that death is not the end, that we are not alone, that in our end is our beginning. This is not metaphor, this is for us truth. I invite you to rise and sing. Friends, I invite you to stay standing for the commendation and the final benediction. Into your loving hands, O merciful God, we commend your son Bill. Receive, we humbly pray, a sheep of your own fold, a lamb of your own flock, a son come home. Receive him into the arms of your mercy, into the blessed rest of everlasting peace, and into the glorious company of the saints in light. Amen. And just before the final blessing, a reminder that you're invited to the church hall where there will be refreshments and an opportunity to continue to share stories and memories of Bill, just out this door to my right and down the long corridor. So now a final blessing. On our hearts and on our homes, the blessing of God. In our coming and in our going, the peace of God. In our life and in our believing, the love of God. At our end and our new beginning, the arms of God to welcome us and bring us home. Amen.